In a nation of immigrants, holding on to a sense of where you're from can be tough. Even with their strong ties to church and community, Greek Americans struggle to keep their traditions alive, especially in a place like San Diego. In the 1970s, less than 1% of San Diego's population was Greek. There was only one Greek Orthodox church, St. Spiridon. But the members of a youth group there became interested in Greek folk dancing and formed a group called the Aegean Dancers. The Aegeans performed locally, but they were dancing alone. There just weren't many other Greek kids their age in San Diego. Their advisor had an idea. They would invite other communities to San Diego for a weekend of folk dancing. It was Greek folk dancing with an American twist. A dance competition. No one expected it to become an annual event that would impact thousands of lives.
Describe a word that I've read quite a bit, KEFI.
Oh, KEFI. It's just the feelings you have, isn't that right?
A happy
It's just,
a joyous.
you just can't describe it.
FDF is a big competition that we have every year. For 4 days, we dance 2 rounds of competition, our semifinal and final. It's not for the medals or the prizes or competition. All getting together once a year in that communal feeling. I think Greek dance is a way of life.
FDF, what a rush.
It's led the direction of my life, which is so weird because it's an event.
We feel that it's important to preserve our cultural heritage.
So much good has come out of FDF for the kids, for Greek dancing.
You feel like proud and accomplished.
I mean, I couldn't imagine my life without FDF.
This is the built-in leadership program for our young people to experience what it means to organize a festival that brings together 2,000 people.
Folk dancing brings people together. You have got to be connected. You've got to hold somebody's hand.
Naturally, the festival's roots were in Greek villages and were being revived at folk dance clubs in Southern California.
Greek folk dance has been part of Greek communities in America since the first community was established here. People brought over their remembrances of their culture, their place in Greece, whether that was an island or a mountaintop or someplace else. But what was different here was kind of the organization around it. And when the Aegean Dancers were founded, there were relatively few Greek folk dance groups in America founded specifically to perform outside of the parish.
Growing up Greek, both my parents were Greek. They would have parties and they would put the albums on and they would be dancing and I would sit in the corner watching them as a little kid.
My yaya, my grandmother, taught us, her grandchildren, to dance from the time we were just toddlers. So that was really my first Greek dance experience. It was part of our culture.
I actually wasn't interested in it until I met Marilyn. I actually was invited into a group called the Aegean Dancers by Marilyn.
The Aegeans and the parish youth group had a new advisor, Peter Priovalos. He and his wife Litsa and their 3 young sons had recently joined St. Spiridon.
Its genesis was certainly for Greek folk dancing.
Because we had no other Greek churches and our kids had nobody else to mingle with, to get to know, we began to think about how do we get these kids to meet other kids.
As Peter got to know the dancers, he remembered a performance he'd seen years earlier, a dance event at the Rose Bowl, featuring thousands of young people from the Church of Latter-day Saints.
My wife and I attended, and there were some 5,000 kids square dancing. And I turned to my wife and I said, could you imagine 5,000 Greek kids in the base of the Rose Bowl dancing Greek?
The annual Greek Food Festival at St. Spiridon would give Peter a chance to get closer to his dream of seeing 5,000 Greek kids dancing.
The community, in order to give a Greek flavor to it besides the food, would invite a dance group from LA, the Intersection Dancers, or from Oakland community that had a group of dancers to come down and dance at our festival, and they would get paid. Our young adults one day came to me and said, you know, why can't we do this?
the experience of what happened in Pasadena with the Mormons came back very vividly in my mind.
And that experience of us performing with a really terrific ensemble gave us such a boost, such a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for what was going on, that we actually began talking, how do we create this as an ongoing event? And that's the beginning of the FDF.
The first year, we had 5 teams, 39 dancers.
And this second year, there were 9 groups who were attending.
In the early days, I had my dog and pony show, a 35 millimeter carousel and a voiceover that would advance the slides when we started it, that would talk about what FDF was. And I would take that show and visit the various parishes in the western United States.
In those early days, it was really 4 communities, dance groups that gelled: San Diego, Fresno, San Jose, and Castro Valley. Those 4 gelled and formed bonds from the very beginning.
Within 5 years, 25 teams attended FDF, but there were obstacles.
People doubted the program's ability to succeed for many, many years. And even in its glory, when it was finally so obvious that it wasn't going to fail, there were those who were doubting Thomases.
Some people opposed the very thing that had helped FDF grow.
I didn't realize I was going to hit a buzzsaw when I said competition.
You know, everyone has a lot of different opinions about FDF. I think one of them is maybe that it's a competition. I think some people don't really, like that too much.
Competition? Come on, Greek dance is supposed to be having fun out there. What do you mean competing? It's the American way to compete. But it works. I can't remember how many years ago, 15 years ago, they took a poll amongst all the dancers. You want competition or do you want to do away with it? 80% said we want competition. Okay.
Organizing the very first festival, we had a debate among us whether we should have it as a competition or just a gathering.
But to me, that's the essence of the Greek soul. The Greeks started the Olympic Games. They had competition not only for athletic endeavors, but also for poetry and also for drama. So it's part of our nature.
I mean, if we were just going out and having fun, I think that we'd still be doing the generic festival dances.
It's not we're enemies or opponents, but we're people who are struggling together and working together. And I think the Christian context of that is that we need to learn how to praise the one who passes us in the race. It makes us better. That's what competition does. That's what American society is. It's built on competition.
Sending a team to FDF was a big commitment for a parish, and possibly a distraction.
Our youth choir brought this beautiful sweepstakes trophy home.
And I'm in Seattle, and Father Homer was the priest of St. Demetrius up there. And I, in front of a group of adults and people interested in folk dancing, gave my presentation. Father Homer asked me a very interesting question. He said, what does dance have to do with the Greek Orthodox Church?
Is the church responsible to teach young people dancing? It could be a ministry, yes. I mean, if you could get a bowling league that the people come and are connected to Christ and say, I'm doing this strike out sin, sure. But their activities, a lot of churches have activities that don't translate into ministry.
The mission of FDF was clearly expanding.
What it would be is a leadership training program as well as this cultural preservation and religious and spiritual indoctrination.
To keep these dances alive and have the kids fall in love with this dancing and music and to perpetuate it and keep it going.
Kids in the dance group want to belong. When your parents are immigrants, it can be difficult. And maybe it was more difficult in earlier times. So this isn't something new today. It's been going on forever. And I think kids, especially when they're an impressionable age, don't want to be different. That's the worst thing they can be, is different than somebody else. So if we can introduce ethnicity in a positive way, it's a win-win.
FDF needed support from parents and clergy, but just as important were the team's directors and the dance judges.
I was a tender judge because I appreciated so much those kids who got up and tried to do something that their teachers told them to do in the churches. And I thought it was so wonderful that they did. And some of them took to it naturally. For some, they were clomping along out of the steps, but they were there and wanting to contribute, wanting to be part of it. And it was very stimulating.
It has to be perfect, so like the judges will know that you're ready for this and you can show them what you got.
We all know what we're going for, and we all know that FDF was very important to us, and now we're kind of making it a little better and getting more confident throughout the steps.
Without the judges, you do not create the intensity, the intrigue, the desire to try to do your best.
Don and Ellie Hyatt taught folk dance at St. Spiridon. Without them, FDF may not have had judges. They called on their connections in the global folk dance community and invited experts to FDF.
They'd come out to give workshops for us, and, it was just wonderful. When we first started dancing, there was very few dances we did.
We didn't know the variety of dances.
And the more teachers we had come in, and then the young children started going to Greece during their summer vacations and doing a lot of research, bringing back. We have thousands and thousands of Greek dances now.
But if it wasn't for Don and Ellie, I would have never known some of these people.
But as FDF grew, FDF started bringing people who really knew Greek dancing, especially in particular, and also on a deeper level than just doing the steps. They understood the dance within the context of the culture and in terms of the village life. And that started to shift the FDF performances away from choreographies and elaborate stage moves to a real sort of replicating the village.
To me, the most important is to see that the groups, that they're actually dancing, not just doing steps, not just looking like robotic movements. And part of that is just, are they feeling the music? Are they connecting to the music? Are they connecting to each other as dancers?
Well, we always had nerves. I mean, there was one year in the early times, I think it was the fourth time that we had gone to FDF, Nikos Savidis had come as a judge, and he looked like this fresh off the boat Greek with this big mustache and long hair, with a big round black hat pulled down over his face, and he had on these skinny bell-bottom pants, and he just looked the part.
The first year I hear all the directors, if Savid is there, they're gonna butcher us. He's a butcher. All kind of names. Captain Zero, they tell me. So, but that make them to question themselves. Why?
What kind of score did he give you? Oh, he gave us a great score. It was so good that we moved from junior to seniors, and we didn't know why.
When I first came to FDF, the performing groups were dancing predominantly sort of Greek-American taverna-style dances, which are sort of like the Las Vegas Rockettes version of Greek dancing. High choreography, straight lines that opened and closed and crisscrossed, and big steps and big movements, loud music, and we consciously try to steer them into a direction of more quote unquote, I don't know if I like this word, authentic village regional style dancing.
The directors, they must to study more. They must looking for more things. The dance, it's not only steps. It's mentality, it's philosophy, it's many, many things. They must inspire the children with history, with all the elements.
Usually, the authentic stuff, depending on how it's done, won't enthuse crowds. But when you start mixing things up and throwing a little Broadway into it, then it starts getting, oh, yay, 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 But really, at that point, you've just basically desecrated a dance.
If you're a judge, you also have your knowledge of the dance, but you also have the emotional aspect of it and are going to react accordingly.
Each of the judges, we don't all have the same criteria. I mean, we have generally the same criteria, but as individuals, we have different things that we like to see.
And I learned this over my years of losing at FDF. Hey, you got to lose to win, you know? After the losses, I learned what was real, what was not.
Half of our goal is to preserve the culture. And so I personally think that it's important that you not only just teach dance for competition, but you also teach the history that's attached to it.
Greek dance and Greek folk song definitely describe the history and culture of the Greek people, because you have to think that a lot of the people in the villages couldn't read or write, so how did they pass down their stories? Through song and dance.
While many dances depict daily life and rituals, others commemorate events. The Dance of Zalongo is the story of women and children from the legendary tribe of the Sulioti, who were trapped during the Greek War for Independence. Rather than face capture, the women, with their children, bravely chose to jump to their deaths. The Chestos is a circle dance from Thrace. A way for young people to meet, the Chestos also gave the men a chance to show off their dance skills.
The Chestos to me was one of those things that people at churches would call me to come teach them. And I was very happy to teach it to them. You know, it's just, the more you go on in life, the more research you pull, you find out that the Chestos really wasn't a dance that was done all the same, by every dancer doing the same move. Even though at the time when I was doing it that way, from 03, 04, it was more of a freestyle dance. A lot of Greek dancing is more freestyle than what we used to know back in the day.
I come from Chios, and there is a stylistic dance that we do in Chios, Chiotiko, Sirto. And most of the Eastern Greek islands, if you talk about the steps, the mechanics of the dance, they're very, very easy to learn because they only have 3 steps. But it's the style that makes it very difficult to do. With this particular dance, you're basically simulating the waves of the sea. When you connect yourself with the music, you're able to hear the almost inaudible kind of direction to bend.
And then every summer I try to go back and do some research in 3-4 different villages to document these dances because they're getting lost there too. And it's important to pass that culture on to these kids. I went to the island of Kythnos, which is the second island down from Athens. It's close to the mainland. A lot of the people from this island, because it was a poor island, they would go over to Asia Minor, which is Turkey today, and work. So they brought a lot of these songs and dances back, and they used them. And because they're also so close to the mainland, they use mainland dances. So on this island of Kythnos, it's all mixed.
The costume from an area called Pontos. It's a Pontic costume. Now the Pontians, they just were fearless. In their dance, it is so emotional, so powerful. These kids came out and performed this dance. Metropolitan Anthony and I were sitting in the bleachers. Those years we used to put up bleachers. I'm looking over to a man to the right of me, and he's crying, an elderly man in his 80s. I thought maybe he got sick. So I get up and go down, and I asked him, in Greek we have a way that a younger person addresses an older, and I said, Barba, in a sense meaning uncle, what's the matter? And he says, I now can die because I know the spirit of my people lives on. He was a Pontic.
Greek culture and Orthodox Christianity are at the heart of FDF. During his years as bishop and later as leader of the seven-state metropolis of San Francisco, Metropolitan Anthony championed the cause of FDF.
Probably the first visionary metropolitan that we had in this metropolis. Not only was he able to put a program like that together with help from many others, but he was engaged during FDF during that weekend. He was with the kids, he was dancing with the kids, and even today you don't see hierarchy dancing. But Metropolitan Anthony did. Fortunately, Metropolitan Gerasimos does.
By the early 1980s, FDF was drawing teams from across the nation and around the world.
And it was at this point that FDF was also starting to grow and research, and they were bringing also people now from Greece to try to help in teaching dances and making them more authentic and making the costumes more authentic.
One of our initial goals was to revitalize the artwork of making costumes. Costumes, first of all, denote the geographic region of where that costume is from.
And over the years, we made costumes galore. You know, we made Asia from Macedonia, we made the Gavakli from Thrace. We made them all, the Cretan and all the islands.
It's usually communities will either purchase costumes, borrow costumes, or they will make their own, sew their own costumes. We did our mothers, you know, the dancers, all the family, the aunts, the grandparents would help out.
This costume is Macedonian, and all the grandmothers or yayas in our church made them. They're definitely hard to dance in because they're really heavy. I'm wearing about 4 layers right now.
So it became, I think it was a revival of those times when some of them were in the villages, and that's what they did. And our parents were happy because here we were nurturing our culture. The Greek community was growing.
We did win 18 awards during my term. So that's 18 years and 18 costume awards that we came away with, as well as 6 sweepstakes.
People feel pushed to learn more and to know more and to do more, and so you get amazing research.
The mission of FDF was certainly two-pronged. One, to instill and educate in young people good, strong business principles and ethics, what it takes to run a business. To also instill in them that just because you're young doesn't mean you can't do something.
We had this notion that we really wanted this to be a youth-driven and youth-run event. And I think that was a key part of the early organizing.
That whole leadership idea touched a lot of people's lives. A lot of the people that are still involved with it today were involved with management teams back then. So again, I think it's fantastic.
Within 2 years, I was given the responsibility to manage the entire budget, and I was almost 18, I think. It definitely taught me a lot about business and leadership.
Going through an interview at 18, 19, never having been through an interview, just that process alone, and then being accepted, and you had to come back with a report, and you had to give reports, and I think it was just a really, really good experience, and it was more than just being on the management team. It was like a course.
My name is George Papengellen, and I have the distinct pleasure of being your host this evening.
To learn how to write a budget, to learn how to coordinate an event, or contact suppliers of different things, or write an agenda. That's what I appreciate most.
And what always amazed me is that we could have a 14-year-old actually running the lunchroom and being responsible for getting, 1,500 people fed. There was a lot of mentoring, and the finished product was a management team that put on a great event.
FDF was very instrumental in my career and in bringing out a talent that I didn't know I had and that was in finance, in budgeting, and cost control.
Being in charge of a $650,000 budget as a 23, 24-year-old is a big undertaking, and that they trust you to do that, pretty amazing. And I run a small business now, and I manage, 15 employees, 3 in the office, and all my clients. And, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't learned all these lessons through all the years of management team.
I'm an aerospace consultant now, but I started out as an electrical engineer, and I made it all the way to the vice president of space programs operations in one company, to have a 20-year career there. And it was by learning from, the mentors that I had at FDF.
In 1985, FDF added a category for choral competition. In the villages, music came from the voices of the dancers and the onlookers. Song and dance were part of the community.
Whether you're in a dance group or whether you're on a team managing the event or a judge, I think the one thing that connects all those areas is the idea of community. And that's really what FDF's about.
Even though there was competition among the dance groups, we cheered each other on. We made friends with the other groups, and we'd have reunions, and the kids from San Diego would drive up to the north, and we'd house them. They'd stay with friends that they had made. And we'd plan these things like picnics and dances and different things for the weekend. And the parents saw that this was bringing Greek youth together where nothing else had done that.
It has tied the communities together and tied the people of the communities together, because it's not just the church, it's the programs, preservation of what's kept the Greeks together in Greece and what's kept them together in the States.
Me personally, if I wasn't Greek, I would have a huge part of me missing, because there's Greek dance, there's Greek school, there's church, there's choir, there's Sunday school, there's so much that we all do together.
We may or may not speak Greek. We may or may not be able to read and write Greek, but we can dance, we can sing, or we can play an instrument. And we have a love of all of the above, and we understand each other.
You have multi-generations, you have 4-year-old kids, you have yayadas and papudas, grandparents, all involved and so engaged in this event.
When we dance at FDF, it's kind of all of us Greeks just coming together, and you get to learn new Greek dances and you get to revisit some old ones.
Starting in the fall, we have practices every week, and then in about January we have 2 to 3 practices every week, lasting 2 to 3 hours, and it's insane.
You got 10 minutes and 12 minutes to either do really well or get bored of this out of it. And then in the advanced scene, you got 13 and 15, where you got to go up there and you got to be ready for action, because everybody's coming in for that goal, basically, or that sweepstakes.
It's about singing your praises to God. It's about, enjoying your heritage and learning your Greek folk songs. It's about having fun singing Lean on Me and having a soloist and break out in gospel. It's about every time they walk out of there saying, thank you, I had a great time.
That's kind of the main concept of FDF, just have fun, because that's kind of why we train, why we do everything, to have fun and to try our best.
Dancing in itself is an emotional experience. And the fact that you can learn to dance something that was danced 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, reawakens the spirit and the soul of perhaps everybody that ever danced it from the beginning of time.
You know, California was a pioneer place for folk dance. Very innovative. Back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of students in Berkeley or UCLA joined the dance ethnology programs. They were open-minded and they use the dance as a medium to understand the other. So FDF offered the chance these two different worlds to connect.
Really, the reason that we're there is to bring Greeks together, especially kids, and to get them involved, not only culturally, but also in their church. And again, to make sure that that cultural and historical background is kept.
We haven't done a good job documenting and collecting all of the material, all the research, and making a good library.
I don't think that people realize how fragile history is. Memories disappear. Time wipes things away pretty quickly. And if you don't understand that responsibility, all of that can go away.
Early on, FDF started a scholarship program for music and dance. Dancers and directors attended symposia and workshops, and some even went to Greece to study and bring back what they learned.
I took over the scholarship program from Charlie Kyriakou, and I noticed that they're sending kids that are the greatest dancers, the greatest choreographers, the greatest They don't need to go. What we need to do is send people who are not quite that strong, are into it, want to learn, but they need a boost. I also used it to help people who couldn't afford to go to Greece. And unfortunately, through the years, it stopped. In my opinion, that's the number one thing that should be funded.
Through FDF in 1984, there was a group of dancers that got to travel to Greece, and it was called Olimasi. And we stayed in Greece for a month, and we traveled throughout Greece, putting on performances, and we went to workshops and got to learn from the experts there and come back and teach our own parishes more dances.
Today, I think they've done a great job of maintaining the program, which I think is critical. But I think some of the training and youth leadership aspect of it has gone by the wayside, and I think probably just because it's risky. So it's harder for them to sort of let that go, or let a 15-year-old run with a $75,000 budget.
FDF was called a ministry, and is still called a ministry, versus an activity. A ministry should lead young people into closer relationship with Christ within the church. Both can coexist. It is not yet fully a ministry, it is an activity of the church. A ministry means that the dance directors are examples who teach the children not only dancing, teach the children to dance in the faith.
My union is basically to keep these dances alive and have the kids fall in love with this dancing and music and to perpetuate it and keep it going.
And I think if we don't have FDF, that kids just aren't going to be involved. That shouldn't be the thing keeping them coming, but I think if that brings them in, the religion and everything is going to come from there, and they're going to stay with it, and they're going to teach their children. And I have this big fear of us losing our culture.
I believe God planted a seed in the Priovalis family's mind and allowed for Bishop Meletios of blessed memory to give it his blessing, and Father Sam Poulos of blessed memory, and Anna F. Stathiou of blessed memory. People from the very beginning of this thing who saw something. They didn't know what they saw, but I believe they saw something.
What they did,
Peter and the Metropolitan Anthony, they save the culture. They did as much as they can, give that light all around. And the young ones, you know, they just love it. I see that. Because they have more knowledge now than what did before, you know, sorry, I'm just, and I thought it was tough.
Today, FDF continues to thrive under the leadership of Father Gary Kyriakou and Metropolitan Yerasimos. And thanks to FDF, Greek Orthodox communities in New Jersey and Atlanta, Georgia have started their own youth folk dance festivals.
Because of FDF, the young kids here in California and the West Coast in general, their dancing really looks Greek.
You know, I'm going to use my husband as an example. He's not Greek, and he experienced FDF a few times. He goes, there's like 2,000 Greek people here. And I'm like, yes, there are. He goes, and they're all loving dancing and singing, and I've never seen anything like this.
The question is, where are we going to be 25 years from now? I hope the dance program is alive and well in 25 years. I hope in the dance program there may be different ethnicities who enjoy Greek dancing. I hope that there may be others, because I tell people you don't have to be Greek to be a Hellene. We are a multi-ethnic society here. We need to get beyond collision to coalition.
Competition really was the stimulus that got people excited and understanding something else. That Greek dancing wasn't just a hasapiko, atsamiko, eserto, kalamatiano. Those 4 dances, everybody knows how to dance them. Today, our kids, when you see them at a party, these kids all know all of these sophisticated Cretan and Pontic and Asia Minor and Northern Greece and Southern Greece dances and the island dances. It just blows your mind.
I think you need to emphasize the importance FDF has played in young people's lives, the memories that they will cherish from all of that, the friends they made, the marriages, the children, all of that stuff. That to me is what's important.
Today, FDF probably has the largest collection of Greek dances performed anywhere.
One of our sons, Father Paul, actually has a degree in youth ministry. And he said, Dad, do you realize that no church has a youth program that lasts 30 years? 10, 12 years maybe, 15 the most. Now ours is, 40 years or whatever, 40 years. So that says something. That means God is behind it. That's what I believe.
And here we are now, 39, 40 years later, still being FDF.